Hello, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the new episode of Desi Calgary, the voice of all Desis here in Canada. Today, we have with us a guest who really needs no introduction, but deserves a great one. Naheed Nenshi made history as Calgary's three-term mayor, becoming the first Muslim mayor of a major Canadian city and one of the most recognizable municipal leaders in the world. Naheed was named the best mayor in the world in 2014, and Calgary was also listed as the third best city to live in globally while he was in office. Known for his sharp mind, plain talk, and sometimes even sharp tweets, he guided Calgary through booms, floods, downturns, and constant debates about the future of our city. Now, he has stepped onto an even bigger stage as the leader of Alberta's NDP, promising a politics that is, in his words, better together. Whether you agreed with him as mayor or not, you could not ignore him. And today, as opposition leader, he is once again at the center of Alberta's biggest conversations, from education and healthcare to our economy and identity. So let's dive right in. Naheed Nenshi, welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Salam alaikum. Namaste. Sasrikal to all our listeners today. What an honor to have you on, to be on with you today. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Naheed. Thank you very much. I remember recently you once joked that if you get a mic, you don't give it back until the khutbah is over.
Oh,
So,
yeah, so this is very true.
right. So
The
I
Imams know that
today, Naheed, I brought a stopwatch and a second mic just
I
in
love
case.
it. I
But
love it. The Imams all know that if I visit the mosque on Eid and they say, give me the mic and say, just say Eid Mubarak, no, they're going to get a khutbah. They're going to get a sermon.
right.
I think people appreciate it, but if they don't, it's my way of getting closer to God.
I know, but don't worry. I'll let you, keep this one as long as you promise no surprise sermons, right?
Okay, no surprise sermons.
Okay. So talking about your early life, Naheed, you grew up as a first generation Canadian in Calgary, right? What's
Yes.
the earliest memory of your childhood that shaped your sense of fairness or community?
Oh, what a great question. Maybe I can back up a little bit
Sure.
to the time before I was born.
Mhm.
So my family were Gujarati, Kachi Gujarati,
Okay.
but I don't come from India. My family is part of the diaspora.
Oh,
So my family had been in East Africa, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, but mostly Tanzania for a
right.
couple of generations
Mhm.
before emigrating here. And when they came to Canada, my mother was pregnant with me. So I
Oh.
always say that I was born in Canada, but made in Africa. And uh, and we grew up like so many of your listeners would have grown up in really a community where we struggled. It wasn't easy.
Right.
We worked very hard. I always say sometimes we were poor, sometimes we were very poor, but ultimately we succeeded because of this place. You
Mm.
know, growing up, my sister and my parents had these beautiful certificates of Canadian citizenship, and
Right.
all I had was a lousy birth certificate. But I soon learned that those four certificates were the most valuable thing my family has ever had in generations. So you
Right.
ask, my earliest memories, right? I was
Right.
born in
Yeah.
Toronto, and when I was 18 months old, the family moved to Calgary. And so I had done all the research, I had written all the briefing books, and I had convinced my family that the future was in the West. Now, my mother tells me the briefing books weren't very convincing, they were just crayon drawings. But we came here when I was about 18 months old, and I grew up in Northeast Calgary.
Oh, okay.
And I remember very well growing up in Marlborough and really starting to understand very young what that neighborhood was
Mhm.
and what the city was. When I was quite young, many men, well, I should say, back up a little bit. When my parents first, it's difficult to imagine this. When
Right.
my parents first moved to Toronto, it was very rare to see other Indian people.
Oh.
And the way that they found the Ismailis is they looked in the phone book. And for those of you who are below the age of 40, a phone book is a book that has phone numbers in it, really thick. They
Right.
looked at the phone book and they looked for names that ended in I or that looked like Ismaili names.
Right.
And they phoned up and then they formed this little tiny community, maybe 5, 10 families. They would do Friday prayers together in the basement of somebody's house.
Yeah.
have any money. But like all new immigrants, they work together to succeed, to help each other try and figure out how to get by in this country. And
Mm.
then not even 10 months later, maybe 8 months later, Idi Amin expelled all the Asians from Uganda.
Oh, right,
Very
right.
first time in Canadian history that
Mm.
Canada accepted refugees who were not white.
Yeah.
And so suddenly thousands of people who looked like my family came from Uganda to Canada, and this little community that barely knew how to get by, barely had gotten there, had to take care of these thousands of newcomers. And that's what really instilled in me, even at that, I was just a baby, but I heard the story so much growing up, and it really instilled in me the importance of seva, the importance of
Absolutely.
service. So
Service.
while we struggled, we also had life of seva. And
Mhm.
that was what was so important to me growing up, because shortly after we got to Calgary and when I sort of became aware of the world growing up, we had a huge influx of refugees to Calgary, to my neighborhood, this time from Vietnam. We called
Mhm.
them the boat people.
All right.
And these people came and fundamentally changed the character of my neighborhood. So sometimes when people who are kind of anti immigration say, I am opposed to immigration that changes the character, I
Yeah.
say, well, those people came and fundamentally changed my neighborhood, and the brown people came and fundamentally changed the neighborhood and made it so much better. You
Absolutely.
know, not just that we can get great karagos and butter chicken in any corner in Calgary or
Yeah.
banh mi and Vietnamese subs, but also made us ready to be true citizens of the world and lead the world. And so I
Mm.
grew up in this very multicultural milieu, very working class. There were no doctors or lawyers' kids at my school. There were certainly people who had done well in life, people who had
Right.
cottages
Yeah.
and boats, but they were plumbers, they were electricians, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And growing up in that kind of neighborhood and going to public school and being able to be exposed to all these different things really made me what I am today.
Wonderful. Wonderful. But did little Naheed ever imagine he would be a mayor, or did he just want to be a Spider-Man?
Well, that's a good question. I'm a huge comic book fan. And so my one indulgence when I was little was
Right.
always that I got the latest comic books. And there was a point where my family, I think I was about probably grade 4, grade 5,
Mhm.
and it was a point where my family got really poor. We lost our business. We were really struggling. We relied on the generosity of neighbors and friends to help us with groceries. And
Right.
my big commitment was I shall no longer buy comic books. And I have never bought a comic book since. But
Okay.
I'm still a comic book fan. But no,
Okay.
I was always very bookish.
Mhm.
If you ask anybody who knew me as a kid, they'll say we would have dinner parties and you would hide under the table so you wouldn't have to talk to anybody and read books.
Right.
And so to this day, I'm still very shy, very introverted, don't like to talk to people. No, none of this is true. I grew out of all of that. But the really thing is, and I'm going to be quite serious for a moment here.
Mhm.
We didn't have anything growing up, and we
Mm.
worked really hard. Just like almost everyone who's watching this show will be experienced with that. We worked really hard. We failed at multiple businesses, right?
Mm. Right.
Most of the time growing up, my family had a laundromat on 17th Avenue in Forest Lawn.
Mhm.
And, our clientele in that laundromat were even more poor than we were.
Mm.
And we were just sort of trying to get by. And we worked hard. But
Yeah.
I think it would be so false of me to say it was because of hard work that we succeeded. It made a difference.
Yeah.
We also were lucky enough to live and grow in a community that wanted us to succeed, a
Yeah.
community that invested in little Nahid, as you say, right? I went
Absolutely.
to outstanding public schools. I had access to the public library. I explored the city on public transit. I learned to swim in a public pool, right?
Yeah.
And the community as a whole wanted me to do well, even though I looked different, even though I worshiped different. They
Right.
still thought, you're one of us and we want you to succeed. And I owe everything to that community feeling. And that's why I'm back in politics, because the
Absolutely.
world has gotten so angry and divisive now. We've
Yeah.
forgotten our responsibility to one another, I believe.
Absolutely. And then you went to University of Calgary, right? And then Harvard.
That's
Uh,
right.
yeah. So what's the one lesson that stuck with you when you were in the universities?
Well, I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Calgary in business.
Right.
Because, good Desi boy, if you can't do engineering and you're not ready to go to law school, you have to do business, right?
Right.
Or sciences. You're allowed to do sciences. You can do engineering, sciences, or business. Um, but I was really always interested in the management of nonprofit organizations.
Mhm.
But that undergraduate degree at the University of Calgary at that time, look, I didn't have much choice in the matter. We didn't have enough money for me to really go anywhere. And I won a big scholarship at the University of Calgary. So that's where I went. And I always had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder when I went off to work in Toronto and so on, that, I just went to the University of Calgary. Even though I was
Yeah.
president of the Students' Union, I was very proud of it. And
Mhm.
then when I got to graduate school at Harvard, I realized that University of Calgary education was much more rigorous, and it set me up so much better than a lot of my friends who had gone to places like Harvard and Princeton and Yale for their undergraduates.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
realized, wow, we created something in Alberta that's very special. And I remember I was in a class that I was auditing at the Harvard Business School, and it was about regions that have resource wealth and how
Mhm.
to manage their resource wealth. I thought that would be
Right.
helpful.
Yeah.
And I remember the professor saying, I can only think of one region in the world where they really understood how to manage resource wealth, where they invested in education and post secondary education and healthcare and research and really made the most of their oil wealth. And that's a place you've never heard of in Canada called Alberta. And he
Hmm.
said, the premier at the time was a graduate of Harvard Business School, and that's why they did it, right? And I stuck up my hand and I said, well, it's not that perfect. But it really gave me a moment to
Mm.
understand what we had built here that we take for granted and
Yeah.
what is at risk right now. So to me, that was very exciting. But I will tell you though that I was later a professor of business at Mount Royal University, at University of Calgary, then Mount Royal University.
Right.
And man, I learned a lot in that business degree that I use every day, whether it's the
Mhm.
finance side of things or the math side of things or the strategy side. Now, when I went to graduate school, I was
Right.
studying public administration,
Yeah.
which set me up really well for my future life. But I will tell you that I also took classes in things like leadership. And I'll share with your listeners probably my one most interesting lesson of leadership from my leadership classes,
Mhm.
because I think it's an important one. And it's a very simple line. Sometimes you have to get on the balcony and watch the dancers.
Right.
And what that means is when you're in the middle of something, when you're on the dance floor and you're in constant motion, every now and then to be a true leader, you have to step back and watch the patterns and look at the
That's
big picture and understand where we're moving. And that's something I really try to do no matter how busy I am. I
very
try to
nice.
set aside a little piece of my day where I can kind of go, what is happening?
Very
And
good.
where are we going towards and how can I help?
Very nice. How about Harvard? How was that experience?
It was a funny experience because again, I'm from Marlborough. What's a kid
Yeah.
from Marlborough doing at Harvard, right? But here's an interesting thing. I had
Yeah.
two really good friends when I was growing up in Northeast Calgary.
Mhm.
We all grew up very working class, very struggling. All three of us ended up at Harvard.
Beautiful.
And so I was studying public administration. My one friend was doing his PhD in Near Eastern languages and cultures, and he's now one of the most foremost professors of Islamic studies in the world. And the
Wow.
third one is a teacher in Calgary. He went and did his
Wonderful.
education graduate work there. And so I just love the fact that three kids growing up in Northeast Calgary all had that kind of opportunity. And that's the opportunity that I want to be able to give to everyone.
Beautiful. Did Harvard also teach you how to survive Alberta winters, or was that a Calgary only degree?
Okay, I have a funny story. So when I got to Boston, people would, and I had lived in Toronto just before that.
Okay.
And people would say, "Oh my goodness, you're from Canada. It must be so cold there." And it was really irritating me, right?
Hmm.
And so I would always say, Toronto is south of Boston, right? It isn't exactly. It's exactly the same as Boston, but they didn't know
Right.
geography. I was about to say that. And I'm like, it's the same, right? It's not that cold. And I went through my first September to December, and it
Mhm.
was actually very mild. And I
Yeah.
went, oh, maybe it is not as cold there, here as it is there. And I came home for Christmas and it was cold. And then I went back to Boston in January and it was very cold. And that was the point at which I went, Oh, wait, that thing before then, that was something called the autumn. We don't have that in Calgary. So they
Right.
actually had 3 whole months of autumn, and then 3 months of winter, and then 3 months of spring, and the seasons
Right.
all came in the same order. And I was
Yeah.
like, "No, that is not Calgary, man." We can have a blizzard in August, and we can have a beautiful warm day in February. So
Yeah.
listen, I'm used to it. And here's the thing, I will admit to you, the one way in which I've lost all my Indian genetics, I actually prefer the cold to the heat.
Beautiful.
I would actually
Yeah.
prefer neither if I was happy. And it's
Yeah.
not too cold, not too hot. But I can't deal with heat. I sweat. I can't deal with humidity. And people look at me and go, "Aren't you Indian?"
Yeah. That's strange. That's strange. But let me talk about your journey from mayor to provincial leader, right? So
Yeah.
when you were a mayor, people nicknamed you Super Mayor, especially after the 2013 floods, and that was amazing. How does it feel now being leader of the opposition in waiting?
It's completely different.
Mhm.
Not just because I have to wear orange with my purple now, right? But it's a completely different job. So when I was mayor, I wore purple every day. I still wear purple every day. There's some in my tie, but I won't show you my socks on the air. But the reason I wore purple every day is because it's red and blue. And I
Right.
was trying to say, instead of defining ourselves by our tribe or our nation or our ideology, let's define ourselves by our common humanity.
Right.
And now I'm in partisan politics, where there are parties, where I am defined by wearing orange, by being the leader of the New Democrats. And so that has been a transition for me. It's not the easiest thing in the world, um, because when I was mayor, I could look beyond ideology and I could just fix things. Like, people would come up to me and say, "Look, I've got this problem with Calgary Transit. This
Mhm.
bus route is an issue, or no one is cleaning up the trash in my neighborhood," and I could just fix it. And the
Mhm.
job that I'm in now, it's harder to just fix it,
Yeah.
partially because of the partisan system we're in, but
Yes.
mostly because I'm in opposition. And in sort of a beautiful imaginary world, the
Mhm.
opposition would say to the government, "Look, this is wrong, fix it." And the government would go, "Well, thank you for bringing that up. We'll go fix it."
Yeah.
But the world, and it was like that for a long time. But the world we live in right now with Premier Smith and the UCP, they're just not interested in listening.
Mhm.
And so I spend my day sometimes just trying to share the real concerns of Albertans, and I feel like no one on the other side is listening. But the wonderful thing about the job is I get to talk to those Albertans in every
Absolutely.
corner of the
Mhm.
province to really learn what their life is like and how we could make their life better. Because I think too often in politics, we forget the number one rule, which is put the citizen at the center.
Mhm.
Always think about the impact your decisions are going to make on everyday people. So,
Right.
as we're recording this, just to give you an example, as we're recording this, it's very likely that all of the teachers will go on strike.
Absolutely. We will talk about that. We will
And
talk about that.
when I
Yeah.
well, just we can talk about the details of it, but I'll
Yeah.
just use this as an example in this area.
Yeah.
When I heard the premier talk about this yesterday, she was talking about it like it was an abstract thing. Like, it was about the deal she was trying to make with the teachers and so on, instead of
Yeah.
talking about the real harm that is going to happen to parents and kids
Yeah.
when they have to look after childcare, where they have to disrupt their work schedules, and where the children will lose time in learning. And when she said, "Don't worry, the government will provide you with worksheets you can do with your kids,"
Yeah.
it was just
That's
such a thing to say.
yeah.
Forget about the actual worksheets, which are just like
I
printed
know.
off from Khan Academy online.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but it was just
Yeah.
such a thing to say, such an assumption that any parent can drop their life and sit down and do the worksheets with their kids. And when we
Right.
think about the folks, we think about people in the Desi community and the folks watching this show, people are working shifts. They're
Of
working
course.
hard work all the time.
Yeah.
Grandma might be at home, so you don't have to look after childcare, but maybe Nanny doesn't speak English, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
And to think, just imagine that any Albertan could just sit down and take a day off and do math worksheets with their kid is just
Yeah.
not understanding of the reality of the world we live in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So by your talk, what I gather is that being NDP leader gives you more gray hair than the mayor, right?
Sometimes, well, let's say the premier gives me more gray hair than being the mayor, but also I'm getting old, and I used to be known for really lots of hair, and I just don't have it
I
anymore.
know, that's what I'm saying, So, but what's one thing you miss about being mayor, and one thing you don't miss at all?
Sure. The thing I miss is the nonpartisan ability to just do the work, right?
Mhm.
And get it done. I loved that very much. What don't one thing I don't miss at all? Yeah, I don't miss those council meetings, those
Mhm.
long, long public hearings.
Right, right. Well, Naheed, before I wanted you to talk about this teacher thing also, but I was watching your interview with Evan, right?
Yes.
And I just want to condemn whatever happened to him. This should never have happened in a place like Alberta. Do you want to say anything about it?
Yeah, let me tell you the story. So, the government has been hosting this series of town halls across Alberta
Yes.
on the topic of separatism, which is a shocking thing to do to begin
Yeah.
with.
And
Uh,
immigration too.
and immigrate, it's there. So the way they've been working is they're trying to distract from their record, and
Right.
so they want to pander to separatists and talk about how should not be part of Canada, basically.
Mhm.
And
Right.
the format that they're using is they're having these town halls where people grab the mic and give a 90-second monologue, and
Mhm.
particularly in terms of immigration, say really hateful things.
Yes.
I've heard them say, deport all immigrants.
Yes.
And the premier is there, and her ministers are there, and her panel is there, and they don't challenge these people. They just
Yeah.
smile and nod. And it became very apparent very quickly after the first one or two of these
Mhm.
that it wasn't going the way the government thought it would go,
Mhm.
and they were looking bad. And so they've gotten really quite rude in the way that they're managing these things. And so for months now, for 2 months now, they've been
Right.
insulting people, they've been cutting people off. The moderator called somebody disgusting. They cut off people's mics. They
Yes.
roll their eyes at them. And these are just citizens who have committed the crime of having a different opinion than the government. And it all culminated in their last town hall in Calgary, where a 17-year-old student from Winston Churchill High School in Calgary
Yeah.
got up and started to ask a question about the teachers' strike, which the teachers had just voted at the time of that meeting to go on strike. And he got about 14 words in when the
Yeah.
moderator cut him off. And he
Yeah.
didn't realize he had been cut off. He thought the mic was malfunctioning.
Mhm.
So he just started speaking more loudly so that people could hear. And the moderator was unbelievably rude to him and
Yeah.
said, basically, your parents should spank you for doing this. So
Unbelievable.
it was shocking in every way. It was insulting to a young man who had the guts to stand up and talk to the community, right? And raise his issues. But it was also rude. It was also, by the way, in Canada, corporal punishment is illegal.
Illegal.
So it's
Yes.
also saying that something illegal should be done. And I just felt horrible. But I tell you, it's been happening all summer. We also have had a series of town halls all summer,
Mhm.
and we have never cut anyone's mic off. And in fact, people talk about all kinds of issues that are not on the agenda, but we let them, right?
Yeah.
Because we believe that we are better together, as you said. And we make people sit, move their chairs around and talk to their neighbors and discuss issues. But anyway, this kid, Evan, I didn't know him. I'd never heard of him. I do know his school very well because my nieces had gone to that school, but I checked. They didn't know him.
Right.
But I said, I want to give this kid the mic. He was interrupted last night. So I
Yeah.
just asked my staff to Google him and find him, and they did. And I asked him, do you want the mic? Let's do a YouTube live. So we got on
Mhm.
YouTube together last night. I was in Edmonton, he was in Calgary.
It was good.
And we talked for about 25 minutes. He did most of the talking, and it
Yeah.
was wonderful. My heart was filled that young people like this exist in our province
Yeah.
and are advocating for their fellow citizens. It was
And
beautiful.
by the way, yesterday was a Truth and Reconciliation Day. Also,
Yeah.
they should have honored that spirit too.
Exactly. And so, what I said at the end of the interview, and people can find the interview if you go to my YouTube page. It's actually
Yes.
worth watching that 15, 20 minutes. But
I,
at
I'll
the
I'll put,
end,
I'll put a description link actually in my
thank you.
description. Yeah.
And
So
at the end, I just said, it is Truth and Reconciliation Day. That's a
Yeah.
day when we remember that schools can do enormous harm, but it's a day in which we should commit ourselves to making sure we're treating young people with dignity and
Yeah.
respect. And I didn't say it last night, and I wish I had. I would have said, Evan, if anyone ever calls you a future leader, you argue with them because
Yes.
you are not a future leader. You're a leader today,
Yeah,
and you're
absolutely.
doing this
Absolutely.
work today. So
Absolutely.
anyway, it was a wonderful thing, and despite that horrible situation that poor kid was in, I actually felt great at the end of it, and great faith in the
Yeah.
future of our community.
What are you expecting about this strike, which is just around
Listen,
the corner? See-
I'm really worried about it,
Yeah.
because the question that I've been asking is, why didn't the government settle this months ago? They
Yeah.
had the means and the ability to settle it months ago. And I had thought it was because they just wanted to wait till the last minute to force the stress of a deal. Because this is kind of the way they go. They like to create a
Yeah.
lot of stress and then try and come in at the end. But I listened to the premier in her press conference yesterday, and I realized something pretty shocking. She wants a strike.
Oh my God.
She actually wants this to happen. They were already prepared with the worksheets and the $30 a day they're going to give people
Yeah.
for day camps, right?
Yeah.
Suddenly
Yeah.
they found money. They didn't have money to give to the teachers, but they found money to give $30 a day to families. And her her political role model is Margaret Thatcher. She said
Hmm.
this many times. And I think she thinks of herself as Margaret Thatcher. It
Oh
was
my God.
just it was just 4 or 5, what are we now? 25. So 6 years ago. So
Yeah.
not a long time ago, just before she got back into politics, she wrote a column in which she said we should dismantle all public schools. She called them government schools. We should dismantle all government schools and their government unions. So I actually think she's doing this to try and break down public education. And there is no greater sin you could commit against the people of Alberta.
Yeah, you're talking about the education and its priorities. If we see the class sizes, special needs supports, and underfunding, it's keep coming up. What's your long term vision for
Well,
education, and how will you
so
pay for it?
so I graduated from Queen Elizabeth High School in Calgary.
Mhm.
Very simple public school with a very diverse student population.
Right.
And it took me a long time to figure out that I graduated from one of the best public schools in the world. And that's because Peter Lougheed in the 1970s said, with all this resource revenue we're getting, we're going to build the best public education system in the world. And if you think about it, that's kind of a crazy thing to say, right?
Right.
This little place of then 2 million people in the middle of the Canadian prairie is going to be the best place in the world, really? But we were able to do it. And as recently as 2018, Alberta students ranked in the top 5 in the world in science, in reading, and in math. And
Yeah.
we can't say that anymore. We, as you say, even though we're the richest province, we spend the least on public education. Even
Yes.
though we're the richest province, our class sizes have never been larger, and the complexity of our classes have never been more difficult. So in
Yeah.
every classroom, there are students with English language difficulties, there are students with special needs who are not getting the supports that they need. And that's a choice, right? When you said, how will you
Absolutely.
pay for it? Look, there's a lot of very expensive stuff we got to figure out how to pay for. But this was a
Yeah.
choice that this government made to spend the least of any government in Canada. And when the premier says, well, the price of oil has gone down and the cupboards are bare, come on. This is about priorities. The education of our children should not depend on the price of oil.
Not at all. Absolutely. Let's talk about Better Together tour and current
Yeah.
politics. That's you've been quite busy with that, and you've been on the road with your Better Together town halls. What are the Albertans telling you most often?
Well, so this has been a wonderful thing, and it's actually been very surprising to me.
Mhm.
So the Better Together movement this summer wasn't just about these town halls, or as I prefer to call them, community gatherings or jamats, right?
Right. Right.
Um, we've been everywhere. So we have knocked on close to 100,000 doors in Alberta. We
Hundred
have been
thousand.
to music
Amazing.
festivals and dog parks and melas, you name it, just
Yeah.
having these conversations with people. And it started better together was about separatism, that
Mhm.
Alberta is better together with Canada. But
Yes.
what we've really learned in these conversations is we let people vote on what they want to talk about. and we get them to sit with their neighbors in groups of 5 or 6 and have conversations.
Right.
And what we've learned is that Albertans are not only deeply opposed to separatism,
Hmm.
but also they say better together has another meaning, that we are better as Albertans when we stand together with our neighbors. And really, that's the most interesting thing to me, that people have been saying life is so divided right now. We want to
Yeah.
stand with people. So we want to stand with healthcare workers. You know, parents are very nervous about this teacher strike, but I have yet to see a parent who blames the teachers.
Yeah.
You know, they stand with the teachers and say they deserve a better deal. And so to me, that's been the most heartening part of the conversation. Now, all of that said, there's still a lot going on, and I have to tell you that I'm quickly getting pulled out because I've got cameras outside who need to talk to me about the news of the day.
Yeah.
But I'd love to take a couple more questions from you before we have to wrap up.
Okay, wonderful. I will do that. Let's do some rapid fire.
Ready?
Okay. Okay. So what I'm going to ask you is, you can, yes or no, or a very small answer. Coffee or karak chai?
Karak chai, come on.
Okay. Okay. Worst heckle you have ever heard at a town hall?
Oh man, I never get heckled actually.
Really?
Um, I think someone really did not like the socks I was wearing once.
Okay. That's amazing. Okay. So next question regarding Stampede. We are talking about Calgary, and we should not leave Stampede behind. Do you actually like the pancakes, or are you just polite?
I like them, but I have to be careful not to overdose on them. So
Oh,
during the stampede, I give myself a maximum of 1 pancake per day.
great.
But I'm getting very good at flipping them. I used to be terrible at it, but I've gotten the skill.
Okay. Which is scarier, a debate with Danielle Smith or riding the midway rides at Stampede?
Oh, the midway rides. I'm not
Okay.
scared of Danielle Smith.
Okay. Calgary Stampede rides or Stampede food? Which one's your guilty pleasure?
Oh, when I was a kid, it was the rides. The scarier, the better. But now that I'm getting
Okay.
old, my back really can't take it. So I won't just say foods, I'll say specifically mini
Okay.
donuts.
Okay, good. If you weren't a politician, would you be a professor, an Uber driver with opinions, or a Netflix stand up comic?
So I always say to friends, my favorite thing in the world is I love to take people to the airport and pick people up from the airport. And they always
Okay.
say, don't do it, don't do it. And I said, listen, I am a brown man who drives a Toyota Camry. So your choice is me or another brown man who drives a Toyota Camry who you have to pay.
Okay.
But I
Okay.
was a
What's
professor and I'll probably go back to being a professor.
great? What is your go to karaoke song? And please don't say, Oh, Canada.
Oh, I have a lot of them. In the Ghetto, Elvis Presley, You've
Okay.
Lost That Lovin' Feelin',
Okay.
and maybe Chaya Chaya.
Okay. Okay.
But
What
I'm a
emoji do?
terrible singer. I'm in an a cappella group,
Okay.
but I'm the one who doesn't sing.
Okay. What emoji do you overuse?
What emoji do I overuse? Oh, the one that I think is me. It's a nerdy guy with a cowboy hat.
Okay. Okay. Last show you binge watched.
Last show I binge watched, I'm doing it now. I'm watching Star Wars Andor, which, although
Okay.
it sounds like it's science fiction, it's actually about the rise of fascism and authoritarianism.
Okay. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
I believe everyone should have their own choices, but the best thing about living in Northeast Calgary, Desi pizza, chili chicken, Punjabi style.
Wonderful. If you could have one superpower to use in
Teleportation, because I'm always late and I have to be in 10 places at the same time.
okay. If Alberta politics were a Bollywood movie, what would it be called?
Oh my God. Um, Bishum Dhamal.
Okay, so finally, Naheed, Desi Calgary is all about community connection. Could I request you to give a quick shout out to our viewers, something about how platforms like this bring people together?
Well, in as the mainstream media is struggling
Yeah.
and as social media becomes less and less useful as it's controlled by algorithms that
Mhm.
feed you what they want you to know, the
Yeah.
role of independent and particularly independent multicultural media is critical. people like yourselves are not getting rich off of this. I hope
Yes.
not. Well, maybe you are. But you're doing it because you have a real passion and desire to serve the community. That is your seva. It's important seva, because we need to get educated on what's going on around the world. Because the best thing about Canada is it
Yeah.
doesn't ask us to give up our culture or our background or our history, but there
Yeah.
is no division between being proud of our culture and being a purposeful Canadian. And ethnic media like Desi Calgary serve a critical role. So folks, keep watching and keep learning.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you for joining us today. From 3 terms in Calgary's mayor's chair to now leading the opposition benches, your journey is as fascinating as it is full of debate.
And
Whether people
inshallah,
agree,
Premier of Alberta.
whether people agree or disagree with you, Naheed, one thing is certain. You always get Albertans talking and often thinking a little differently. That's a rare gift in politics and maybe even a superpower. We'll be watching closely as you write this next chapter. But for now, thank you for the candor, the humor, and the conversation. And to our viewers, stay tuned, because if this chat is any sign, Alberta's political story is only getting more interesting. Until next time, Israr Kasana signing off. Thank you very much, Naheed, and see you soon.
Thank you, Israt. That was delightful. We'll do it again soon.
So, thank you very much. Thank you very much.